Hey, if you guys are checking this out when it airs, you will want to sign up for this college planning free training that we're having with Paul called How to Plan for College Without Losing Your Financial Future. In this free training, we'll have Paul share with you his proven strategies to help you reduce the cost of college, find the right school for your child, protect your retirement and long-term goals while funding education, and eliminate money stress and feel confident about your family's financial future. So if you have someone going to college, or if you want to start planning for that person in your life to go to college, no matter if they're in high school or middle school, you want to check out this free training held September 30th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the link will be in the show notes. But if you want to check it out, it's crowdcast.io/C/how to plan for college, or just click the link in the show notes. I hope to see you there. Paul Compeau is passionate about helping families figure out how to pay for college and help students develop and continue on the right path for them. He helps parents and students confidently navigate college costs while building long-term wealth. Known for his practical, values-based approach, Paul combines deep planning expertise with relative real-world college advice delivered virtually across the world. Paul is a certified financial planner and founder of BridgeWise College Planning, serving families since 2008. What's up, my financially intentional people? Today, we're going to talk about one of your favorite subjects, and that's planning for college. And we're joined by Paul Compeau. He's a CFP, and this is his area expertise. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to share with you and your listeners.
Yes, I'm definitely excited to talk about this. This is one of my favorite subjects, but I still feel so far removed from the actual conversation of real college planning besides the early investments that I think I have a lot to learn from you.
Yeah, and that's really where we specialize is late stage college planning. A lot of people, they might meet with a financial advisor when they first find out they're pregnant or have their first kid and stuff like that. And that's awesome. But it's a whole different ball game because most people didn't save enough money for college in their 529s or wherever else they save college money. And they have to figure out the rest of that bill. So most people come to me when they have a freshman, a sophomore, a junior in high school, and they're like, oh, crap, we don't have the money, and these bills are ridiculous right now.
And I think that's where most of my audience is at. So what do these conversations look like, Paul? I know a lot of people come panicking because it is a super crazy expense right now. So where do you start these conversations off with these people, especially when they come really, really anxious about these things?
Yeah, so I always start with recognizing where they're at because there is a little bit to be anxious about. So even like an out-of-state public university, you're usually looking between $60,000 and $85,000 per year.
A year.
And that's where, you can get maybe some in-state colleges if they're a great fit for the student, maybe $25,000 to $40,000 if you find something in-state. But the price tag has just gotten astronomical. And we're not even talking about the elite, more Ivy League type schools that are, most of them are between $95,000 and $100,000 for 1 year for one student. So we absolutely identify with the problem. We understand the problem. We know exactly what you're up against. And then it's just a fair assessment of where you're at financially, right? What can we actually provide? What efficiencies can we find within your financial life? And that's why I love talking to great hosts like you that are already trying to find a lot of those efficiencies, helping people do things better. We love to do that for the families, and we do that on a daily basis. And that's one of the things that my background, I've been through my kids are younger. So my kids are 11 years old and 8 years old. So I haven't paid for college out of my pocket yet. But I've done it over 500 times on a one-on-one basis with the families that we serve. It's been 8 years probably since I've been surprised and had to do some homework to figure out somebody's numbers because you're unique and every client is unique, but I've seen them before. You know what I mean?
I love that.
And that's what, just bringing that experience. So when I come on a conversation like this or I'm sitting one-on-one with a client, I get to share all of those great things that those other families did that your listeners can repeat. And I get to share some pitfalls. Usually they ran into the pitfalls right before they met me that they made that they don't want your listeners to fall into.
Yeah. Catch me up to date. So I went to USC in 1999. And the price tag then, and USC is not a cheap school, but the price tag then was about $40,000 a year. In comparison, what is it for like that level school or that school specifically right now?
Yeah, when we talk cost of attendance, we want to make sure we're communicating exactly what that means. So the cost is not just the tuition, it's also the room and board, it's the books, it's the travel, it's all the different things you need. You need a computer to make an education work, right? All of these different things cost money. So each of the schools do publish a cost of attendance each year. Most schools in USC's category are going to be between $85,000 and $100,000 per year. So USC, if you're living on campus or off campus, they expect USC in their own documents, they say this year is going to be about $99,000. If you live with your parents, then it's only $86,000, right? It's still absolutely astronomical and a ridiculous amount of money. It's a big deal selecting what school is best for you, but it's important we don't select based on the price tag. The list price, very few people end up paying the list price. Even UCLA around the corner is $85,000 if you're out of state.
And that's the public school.
That's the public school, right? So yeah, we're talking about crazy high price tags. And what most people don't know about those high price tags is very few people end up paying that high of a price for those universities. So a big part of what we want to look at with the family when we're selecting that school list is what schools can be absolutely generous for a family that's in your financial situation with a student who's in that student's academic position, right? So if we're looking at both of those things and looking at what schools can be out, just to have money ready for a family like that, that's going to be the biggest thing you can do is select the right school in the college planning process. So wanted to make sure we mentioned that early, because if we don't get the right school, that's where you've heard, Nasima, you've heard other people say, don't worry about financial aid. Our families like ours don't qualify, right? It's probably because they picked the wrong school. And then the second part that you want to know about is how the financial aid formulas work, because maybe they didn't know how to go through the process. Maybe they didn't know what things count and what things don't count ahead of time. Or maybe they did know and they didn't make the adjustments because they didn't think it would matter. And that's where it's a combination, those myths of we make too much money for financial aid usually come from people who didn't know the system. So if we don't pick the right college and we don't work the system, yeah, you're not going to get financial aid more than likely, right? And you're going to end up paying $99,000 for a school like USC. But it doesn't have to be that way. So the National Association of College and University Business Offices came out with a study. The average discount for undergraduate students at private universities is 56%. So that means most people are paying less than half of that amount. And we want all of the families to qualify for every dollar of financial aid that you can qualify for.
I appreciate you indulging me in that, because I was genuinely curious and it just made my heart drop to hear that. However, to your last point, I will say that USC has a very generous endowment. And when I went to that financial aid office and told them, my daddy said he's not paying for this, they went ahead and applied a grant so that all 6 years, because I went there for undergrad and for grad school, only came out with $40,000 in debt.
Oh, that's amazing. And we hear those stories all the time. And I'm assuming most of that was for the grad school work.
No, actually, I got a full scholarship for grad school. So that was all for undergrad. So basically, only after the grant that they put on, it was like $10,000 a year. And then I got a full ride for grad school and I was working so I could pay my room and board.
Yeah, most people is the reverse of that. Most people nowadays, they do better with undergraduate financial aid than they do for grad school. So you must have had a great brain on that full ride for grad school. Those are harder to come by in most cases. But yeah, knowing the process is such a big part of that.
Yes.
So we have a family who came in her husband had actually just died. Unfortunately, a couple years before we met her, she had a couple high school students that were very bright and got really good grades and can get into some of these amazing universities. But she was showing six figures in her financial accounts because she had just unfortunately got that death benefit. It was going to absolutely kill her financial aid. So she worked part-time at a school her whole life, helping out at the school, maybe made $20,000 or $30,000 a year. We were able, when we positioned the student correctly, we got her into some great universities. She's ended up choosing Boston University, which is one of those 90,000 plus schools.
Yes.
But she ended up paying less than $3,000 a year for that university, because we were able to educate her and help her understand, here's what's counting against you, here's what's not counting against you, and here's where you can move from one category to another in order to do that. And that's where a lot of people struggle, is in that financial aid category. So most people talk to that financial advisor when they find out their kids are young, or at least your listeners who are financially responsible do stuff like that, right? And they know they should save more, but they only have so much income, and they're trying to support everything else they need to do as a family and everything else, and they save something up. But think from the financial aid office's perspective. One of the things I want to make clear is colleges are a very large, very successful business, right? USC didn't get that endowment by being bad at business, right? They're a very large, very successful business. Their billing arm is the financial aid office. They're the ones that choose how much money goes out and how much money comes in, right? So they're choosing what you pay for college. And because different students are paying different prices, they have to decide who's going to get more in financial aid, more free money, more grants, more scholarships, and who's going to not get it, right? One of those things that they use to determine that is how much money you have saved for college. So think if you were the financial aid office and you see a 529 accountant and things like that, they know they can charge that family more because you have that money sitting there ready to give them. And that's where, in a lot of cases, people don't realize this, that just an extra $10,000 in savings can cause you to pay more for college, anywhere between $500 and $2,500 per year. So those good decisions you made to save for your kids' college, for a lot of families, they end up hurting them when it comes to actually paying the bill. And it's good that they saved money. So from a financial planning perspective, saving money is always better for your net worth than spending it, right? So that's good. If you have a bill coming up in the future, definitely save the money, but you want to look very closely on where you're saving that money, because where you save that money can have a detrimental impact on your students' ability to go to those top tier universities. Because if you can only afford $30,000, $40,000 a year, and that's your budget for college, you're counting on financial aid. And if you save that money for college in the wrong spots, you're not going to get enough financial aid to make it happen.
I definitely want to talk about that because I hear that often. Everybody, like I often share my numbers, and then when people see that I save in a 529, they're just like, isn't that going to count against your daughter for her FAFSAs? But before we get to that, I do want to touch on the death benefit part.
Sure.
And like, you get a 6 or even 7 figure death benefit. Does that count against you when you go to apply for aid?
Yeah, so it depends on where you put that money. So once again, there's a whole list. And if people go on our website, we'll have some educational pieces on there that'll talk through. There's certain assets that count. There's certain assets that don't count. The things that don't count against you in the financial aid formulas are things like your retirement account at work, or a Roth IRA, or if you have a cash value in your life insurance policies, that doesn't count against you, or the equity you built up in your house. If you paid down your mortgage and stuff like that, that will count at some schools, but it doesn't count on the FAFSA form. So there are some schools who do use that against families. So knowing those formulas, knowing what counts, what doesn't count, is a huge benefit as you enter that process. So if you did just get a large death benefit, unfortunately, because somebody in the family died, or you got an inheritance, or you got whatever else it is, you just made a bunch of money and saved it, wherever that's positioned will have a major impact on how the financial aid is going to work. Our seniors are going to be filing that in October. So every single October, the FAFSA opens up, and we want to adjust those in a very financial sound way to do that, because when we work with families, one of the things we recognize is that financial aid is not the only thing that matters. We need to consider tax. We need to consider any liquidity needs. We need to consider investment risk. We need to consider all of those different things to make that financial plan work, because we can't just take $100,000 and put it into a retirement account. And if we could put it in a retirement account, then it's not available to pay for college, right? And that's the pickle that we look through and have very successfully guided families through that process of how to save money or how to get money off of the financial aid formulas, but still have it available to pay for your kids' college.
Are there penalties for moving that money around so close to that FAFSA deadline?
Not on the FAFSA.
Okay. All right.
So assets, and this is one of the unique things with financial aid, income's going to count 2 years before you go off to college, right? So if we're filling in, if we have a senior right now this year, they're going to be using the income from last year, the last full calendar year, to fill in that. So the beginning of the senior year in October to fill in that FAFSA.
So for 2025, they're going to be looking at 2024 income and then 2025 income. Okay.
Nope. So sorry. It's just 1 year of income that counts. So if we're filling the FAFSA in October of 2025, it's because they're going to school in the 26-27 school year.
Got it.
They're senior right now. They're going to be just looking at the 2024 income. But assets, so that full year of income, every dollar you earned, even things that seemed tax-free, sometimes they're going to count too, right, as income on the financial aid formulas. But the assets only count on the one day you fill in the form. So you can have $500,000 in your account over the summer. If the account only shows $5,000 when you go to file the FAFSA, that's what you should put on the FAFSA. So that's where we are able to maneuver right up until you file that first FAFSA. And even then, we can still maneuver for the following years. And then the other thing that most people don't think about is, and it's so interesting, is you have the ability to negotiate with the universities. And we recommend waiting until after the university makes the first offer. And that's where the financial aid offices are constantly under awarding and not giving as much financial aid as they could. But negotiating is a very, very tough thing. I've had families try to do it on their own and ended up losing some financial aid because they're going to be looking laser focused on your family's situation. And if they made a mistake before, they're going to correct that mistake. And sometimes that mistake is in your favor. So you want to be very careful with that thought process. And that's why for families, we do offer a free college readiness breakthrough session. That's a 1 hour for any of your listeners of our time that we'll go through and we'll look at their financial situation. We'll look at what they're thinking about doing. We can help them. So we had a family who had 2 seniors came in for that session. They were lost. They didn't have a plan. They didn't think they had any money to pay for college. They had 2 really bright girls. They had moved here from Africa when the girls were young and just didn't know the system, didn't know what was going on with it. Within about 2 months after they first came in for that college readiness breakthrough session, we had a plan in place. If you do A, B, C, and D, not only will they maximize their financial aid, but we'll be able to pay the rest of the bill when it comes. And what's happening with their plan is now we're preserving a lot of the money that maybe some people end up spending on that undergraduate degree, and we're saving it for those advanced degrees when the student goes off to med school or whatever they do after that bachelor's degree.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed. I'm going to bring you back to the 529 conversation. Yeah. And I know you just said like it's about where that money is structured at the time when you apply for the FAFSA. But in general, does having a 529 count against you or your kid when you're applying for financial aid?
Yeah, great question, because that's where everybody says to save for college. Think from the financial aid office's perspective. If they see that you have a 529 and they're looking at who can pay a bigger bill, you think the people with a 529 can pay a bigger bill than those that don't have one?
Of course.
Of course. So they're going to charge, I'm convinced, and they're good people. I shouldn't be too hard on them, but I'm convinced they do. They like play some music and they do a happy dance because they're excited when they see 529s because they know they can charge that family more. So absolutely, you're going to lose value from that 529 because you lost that financial aid. And that's the part that most advisors aren't looking at because it's not their area of expertise. Most advisors, even the ones that recommend 529s, their main purpose is just to take the money that you give them and invest it for later, right? They're not actually looking at the rest of your financial picture. So most of the time, they don't know if you financed your car or not, right? They don't know how you're going to pay your college bill. They don't know what other assets you might have. Maybe they did a rough estimate with you when they first signed you on, but that's not their responsibility to plan out your financial life year by year to make sure you're doing everything the best way. They just take the assets they're given and grow them for retirement. And most of them are pretty good at that. But yeah, when we look at 529s, it definitely hurts you for financial aid, but it gets worse than that. The 529s, they're not liquid for anything else. So if we need that money before they go to college to keep you out of debt or something like that, it's not really available because there's penalties and taxes and all sorts of stuff that stop you from using it. And then on top of that, I'll go CFP nerd for just a second here, if you don't mind. We look at the risk and the return inside those, and the risk is pretty much the same as the stock market in a lot of the funds inside there, but the returns are trailing it significantly. That's where it's very rare. And we do analysis on hundreds of 529 accounts on behalf of our clients and look at what's available. And after understanding how they work, I've never had a client put more money into a 529 account. And that's one of the interesting things when it comes to planning for college. And I won't get too much into the politics in the government, but it's our states that we're paying taxes to that are advertising these to everyone, saying this is the place to save for college. And unfortunately, that really hurts a lot of families. So once again, I'll repeat, saving money is good, right? If it helps you to save money that you wouldn't have otherwise saved, if you want to pay for your kids' college, probably better to put it somewhere than to buy a boat, right? We do want to save money, but we want to consider all of those different impacts on how we save that money if we're going to do it in the best way possible. So a 529, if we're saving for college, that'll get you, as far as rating, it's 7 out of 10, right? It's better than not saving, but it's probably not the best place to save.
Just to clarify, you're saying, does it count against you on the FAFSA or does it count against you in the financial aid offices or both?
Both.
Okay. So another thing with the 529s, right? If the 529 is, say, you can change the beneficiary of the 529 at any time, and I'm putting it like as a family bank, right? At $30,000 of that is going to go into her Roth IRA. And then is there a benefit of saying, like, for college purposes of the 529 that's available for her, I'm only going to allocate like $20,000 of it under her name?
What else are you going to do?
You see what I'm saying? Save it for my other 2 kids. Let it continue to grow for my other 2 kids.
Yeah.
And do the same thing.
Yep, and it depends on the school how that's going to be treated. So a lot of schools like USC, they're asking additional questions from a second form called the CSS profile. They're going to count that against you every single time. So it doesn't matter if it's saved
for the parents or for the child. Okay. For the parents' contribution part. Okay.
That part of the calculation, but it's all one bundle. It all ends up in the same number of how much your family has to come up with to pay for college.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing that most people don't think of. Yeah, we don't want to burden our kids with debt, and we want to figure out this problem. It's absolutely crazy, but the right fit school will solve a lot of those problems.
Yeah, let's focus in on that, because I think that is like the biggest message here, is to find the right fit, because I wasn't trained like that, right? I was trained, you get into the best college that you can get into and you figure out how to pay for it later. And I think that's how a lot of people are trained. But then I learned, like later in life, I learned like these people like strategically pick their college by how much it costs and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, that was not even a concept for me. I didn't even think about that. I want to lean in more on that.
So that advice to the kids, I would just tweak it just a little bit. They're not too far off with what you heard, right? We want them to get into the best college. We want them to apply to the best college, but that doesn't mean that's the one that's going to be the best fit when we get there. right? So when we're talking about best fit college, what you're talking about is let's get really good grades. Let's get really good test scores. Let's aim for as high as we possibly can. And that is absolutely great for kids as long as they can handle that little bit of pressure, right?
Yes.
So if they can handle that, then absolutely they should be pushing themselves to get the A's. They should be taking an extra AP class. They should be studying and taking the ACT and SAT a few times, right, to try to improve those scores. So that is all good. When we talk about which one is the right fit, though, it has to be the right campus fit. Is it in a city or is it in the country? Is it somewhere? Does it fit? How far away is it from home? How liberal or how conservative are the kids on the campus? What kind of environment are you going to be in? Do you have to have a bunch of parties, or would you rather go to church with your friends on Sundays? What is the different environment that you want on campus? So it has to be a great campus fit, right? If you're going to a school where you want to have fun and you want to hang out with your friends, and 90% of the students are just going to be in the library all the time, maybe it's not what the fit that you need for college, right? Maybe the library is better, but for other kids,
I would say,
right?
yes.
So we need it to be the right campus fit. We also need the right curriculum. So that's all in the coursework. We need the right major. We need the right academic level for that student. Some colleges are going to teach that first English class at a very different level than maybe a community college would. And we need the student to be prepared for that. Now, the college application process usually does a good job of identifying which kids can handle what coursework, right? If you're looking at what's a good, USC is probably a good example. We'll keep on that one. If you're a 2.8 student in high school, they're not going to let you into USC because you're probably not going to be able to handle that coursework, right?
You will not.
Exactly. So they're doing a reasonable job of that. But when we're identifying what schools we should be applying at, they don't tell you that ahead of time before they take the application fee. There's colleges that are getting millions of dollars just on application
fees. Yeah.
So when you see the schools that have 8% or 4% acceptance rates, think of all of those application fees that they're generating. Like, it's just crazy high numbers. And that's why a lot of them say they're test optional and stuff like that, is so they can collect more application fees. We need good test scores to get into competitive college. You're probably not getting in without a good test score, right? So even though they say they're test optional, I'm convinced they're just trying to collect more application fees. When we look at that, if we find the one that's the right curriculum, we find the one that has the right campus, then we need to find the ones that have the right cost. And that's where that financial fit is the hardest one for people to predict, because if you just ask the kids, and Naseema, you mentioned that you have kids, have you ever told your kids that you can't afford to buy them something?
Oh my God. They
all
don't
the time,
believe
right?
me. All the time, but they don't believe me. They don't care.
They keep asking
grandma
for stuff, and they want the new pair of shoes, and they think you should go out to eat every single meal.
Every night.
Everything, right?
Yes.
And I promise you, they're going to keep asking, but they're listening to you. And when they go to apply to colleges, they're going to look at the price tags and they say 30,000 and they see 90,000. They don't really know what those dollars mean in the real world.
Yet. Yes.
But we know that mom is making a decision on $100. So a lot of kids will only apply at those cheaper universities because they don't know how the financial aid system works. And that's where we want to identify those good financial fits of where that student, for their grades, their test scores, the family's financial situation, all of that has to fit together when they're designing that college list. And that's the part that a lot of people, even great counselors who work with the students, and we have an amazing counseling team on our staff to work with the students to find that right fit. But most counselors out there aren't considering the financial fit, and they're definitely not helping you get more financial aid. Right. And especially at the high schools, and it's probably the same around you. The national average right now is there's only one counselor for every 408 students.
Yeah.
According to the American Student Counselors Association. So it's just absolutely astronomical. And they're worried about social issues. They're worried about class schedules is most of their time, actually. And we have some amazing counselors that I'm friends with. They would love to spend all of their time just working with the A students who are going off to college. If they could just do that for their whole year, they would love to spend the time, but they don't have the time to be able to do that. So that's where a lot of them end up doing group things when it comes to college planning. They'll have a college night or a college fair, and they'll have a bunch of schools come out, and they maybe have a speaker or two, but they're not helping the students on an individual basis. So a lot of people do end up hiring outside counseling, but even most outside counselors aren't really digging deep into that financial fit and how financial aid is going to work for that family.
Yeah, okay. I am like thinking back on that and just not understanding those numbers, but understanding that this is like way more than I can even conceptualize. So I don't even know. Like, I remember getting that letter from USC and seeing that $40,000 and being like, I know this is more than what my dad makes in a year. Like, how is this even possible? But because it was so far out of my range of understanding, like, I was just like, I can't even think about it.
Right.
But yeah, you mentioned a couple of things and like the college campus fit and all of those like kind of social things and academic fit. Do you work with families on that, or do you just focus on the financial fit piece?
No, we have a full counseling team that works with the students one-on-one to help them develop their resumes during high school. So we'll sign on students as soon as middle school to help develop that resume that's going to be going on the college application. So what classes you pick, what clubs you do, what sports you do, all of that goes on the college applications. And if we want to have the ability to get into those great universities, we're not making the kid anything they're not. So don't hear that wrong. We're not doing things just to put it on the college resume. But if they're thinking about dropping a club and they're going to try to apply as an engineer major and they just have too much on their schedule, they need to drop one of the clubs for their junior year, maybe don't drop the robotics club because it's going to look really good on the application, right? Or whatever it is they're involved in and they enjoy doing, we're going to help them make those decisions along the way of what the applications are going to look like and what colleges are genuinely looking for in those applications. As much as we can do things that show leadership, that show volunteerism, all the different things, academic rigor, how hard your class schedule matters a lot more than what people think it does. So if you had a bunch of AP classes available to you at your high school and you didn't take them, you're probably not getting into a top tier university. So those decisions are happening when the students are freshmen and sophomore in high school, if they're going to be able to get into those classes and utilize them. So all of that adds up into our counseling team being able to help the students with their essay, help them tell a unique story throughout their application and essay together that allows them to get into some universities that they might not have otherwise gotten into. So it's obviously not our counselors doing all the work and building the resume. The kids have to go out and do the stuff, and they have to be amazing kids as well. But telling that story and creating that story that's going to be on those applications is a big thing that you want to have the experts on your team for.
I love that. That's a phenomenal service. And I love that you work with people as young as middle school. Do you work with people in testing out of courses too? Doing the I'm always going to say this wrong. The CLEPSI, like those kind of tests where you can like test into eliminate maybe the first year or two of college?
So we haven't gotten into that one yet.
Okay.
It's something that when we're working with individual institutions, we can identify when those kind of things are available. But as far as test prep for those things, no, that's not something we're helping with. Test prep for the ACT and SAT we help with. And then we do work, and that's one of those things when we look at the right campus fit, the right culture, we're looking for the right curriculum, and we're looking at the right cost all together. That's something that's very unique that I don't know of many other companies that do that, because it's just such a different area of expertise to bring all of those together into that counseling that we have for our students.
And I know you talked about like most of the people that come to you, even though you do start in middle school, most of the people that come to you are in those later phases of planning, junior, seniors in high school. How typically, like, what is your fee structure like? How do you work with them? Is it like compensation, or is it like flat fee? How does it work?
Yeah, so we charge anywhere between $3,000 and $8,000 per student that comes through our program. Don't let that scare any of the listeners away from having coming in and asking the questions in that college readiness breakthrough session. We are fee-based, so we only work for the clients that we serve. We're not. You ever meet with a financial advisor and they're just trying to sell you a different mutual fund that makes you a little more return, or open a new bank account, or whatever they're trying to get you to do? That's not how we operate. We only work for our clients. So it's such a unique relationship. We're not with a bank. We're not with a brokerage company.
You don't work for the colleges.
Yeah. we only work for those families that we serve, and we love that relationship. Yeah, we are fee-based, and what that allows us to do, though, is be very selective of who we sign on. So for most people, when they come in for a college readiness breakthrough session, they're going to have a few questions that they really need answered, and we're going to answer those questions. We're going to help them understand what financial aid is going to look like and just give an honest assessment of where they're at in that picture. But we turn away most people. Like only about 3 out of every 10 families who come in for a college readiness breakthrough session actually get the opportunity to work with us on a long-term basis, because if we're going to charge a fee, we're looking for a significant multiple on that fee that they're going to get a great return. So if people type in BridgeWise College Planning onto Google or another search engine, you're going to see that we have all 5-star ratings. We're going to see that we have a lot of very happy clients. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is we're awesome at what we do, and we have a team of amazing people here that do amazing work for those students and for those families. But the second reason is that we're very selective on who we sign on. So if we're going to charge a fee, we're looking for an 8-10 times multiple. If we're going to charge a few $1,000s, we're looking for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of benefit for your family. And that's what we've been able to deliver on a very consistent basis for the families that we do sign on.
And there is a big price range. Is that depending on the amount of services, the time spent, like the age, like what determines that? Where people
so it's not as much based on age. It's how much help that family wants or needs. So if we don't have to do a full service package for somebody, we can just get them the help that they really need. And that allows them to see the success they want to see. Most people do end up in the more robust package because they need help with the student. They need help with the financials. They need a lot to do with them. We're not just a team of financial planners. We have the college counselors. We love to help the students. We get into the right school. And that's so important, because if we can finish in 4 years, the national average is 5.8 years right now for a bachelor's degree. We want a master's degree if we're going 6 years. But 4 years is so important, not just because it saves mom and dad money on those extra 2 years of tuition. It's an extra 2 years that person's in their adult years that they're earning money as well, right? So most starting jobs, it depends on what field you're in, but 60, 70, 80, even $100,000. If we're paying $50,000 a year for the 5th year and $50,000 a year for the 6th year, it's not just the $100,000 of tuition we paid to the college, it's the $150,000 or $200,000 that the student didn't earn. So now we're looking at $250,000 swing of wealth away from that family just because the student didn't pick the right school.
Yeah, I love that perspective. Are your services state specific, or can you work all across the United States?
Yeah, we work all across the United States. Our home base is in Troy, Michigan. We're a proud Michigan company. We love working with families, but we have people in Connecticut, we have people in Florida, we have people on the East Coast and the West Coast and all over the place. Yeah, we've realized that virtual works really well. We were, even before the pandemic, we were probably 70 or 80% virtual meetings because we work at people have friends everywhere. They're referring to us. They want to introduce their friends and family to us because they love the services that we have.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I love like the full spectrum of services that you offer, because like you said, most people in the financial services space are only looking at that one piece, and they don't understand the universities. They don't understand the planning. They don't understand all of those things. So to have that comprehensive service of being able to look at that and to be able to work with the students to prepare them for that, I love. So how can people start working with you guys?
Yeah, definitely go on Google, search BridgeWise College Planning. You'll come up with our website. It's bridgewisecp.com. So bridgewisecp.com. On there, you have the opportunity to book that college readiness breakthrough session. There's a line right up on the first page you log into. It says it right there. Click that button, find a time that works in your schedule, select that, and then we're going to be able to help you in that session understand what your college picture is going to look like. There's a quote from T. Boone Pickens. He said, "A fool with a plan can beat a genius with none." And I'm sure you've said similar things to your friends and to your kids. Just think it through before you do it. And it's true in just about anything, but if a listener out there is a parent of a high school student, that's going to hit really hard right now. Don't wait until you pick the school and receive the bill to try to figure everything out. The more prep that you do ahead of time, the more ready you are, the more expertise that you have ahead of time, the better the results you're going to get, the better that the kid's life is going to be, the better that your financial life is going to be, the more that you'll succeed in the college process.
Yes, I fully believe that. And this is a question I meant to ask you earlier with this. Yeah. I have to ask you this question because I know it's on so many listeners' minds, is that now everybody is saying college is not the answer and kids are not going to college these days. Is that what your everyday experience?
I'm biased, so everybody who comes and talks to us wants to send their kids to college,
right?
That being said, our counselors are absolutely looking if college is the right path for those students. So there are some people who come in for college planning, and our recommendation is not to go to college. And that's probably, if the parents are planning on spending 30, 40, 50 grand a year, that's like the best case scenario is that ahead of time that you shouldn't do that.
Yes.
It is pretty rare. Our students do tend to be more college oriented and in that direction. What a lot of people miss on the college education, and I wish I knew this when I went to college, because I didn't do a great job with it, is it's not just the education, what you learn in the classroom. And a lot of people think about becoming an adult and gaining that independence and some of that stuff, and that matters too. It's hard to replicate outside of that college atmosphere is the relationships that you build with people that you can go back to throughout your lifetime, right? Mm-hmm. So especially for people who are in fraternities or sororities, but even people who aren't, that are just in a dorm and have a great friend that they stay with for a couple of years and become really good friends. Those things can last your entire life. And that's why the more prestigious schools tend to attract the people that have money and want that for their kids. Is they're not just going there to go to class. They're going there to meet friends that are at their level, that are going to help them in life. A lot of people are meeting their spouse at the university. And I'm not saying that there's any wrong path in life, but do we want our kids meeting a USC spouse, or do we want them meeting a community college spouse? Those are the kind of things that a lot of families are now thinking through. And it's not just because everything, yes, we can go online and we can learn more than any university professor is ever going to teach us, right? As far as the facts and the curriculum and stuff like that. But you can't replace those relationships that you build. And it's very hard to replicate that outside for that 18 to 22-year-old range. It's very hard to replicate that outside of the universities.
I agree. But I love that you don't necessarily tell everybody that you're ready to go to college and just set them up. Yeah. And that's so real. And being able to identify that and to speak to that to the kid and the parents, like I feel like a lot of people need that validation, because I think, like, for society, it's often an expectation and people don't think alternatively. So I really love that. But all of your services seem phenomenal, and I'll have all your links in the show notes, so don't worry, you guys can click through to that. But this conversation has been very enlightening for me. I've learned so much, and I didn't even know services like this existed. So I'm super happy to be able to share this with my audience. And selfishly, I always just love learning about new pieces of financial information and financial services that are available, because it's all about what you know is available, because a lot of this information just isn't common knowledge. And to be able to be exposed to that and share that with my audience, I feel is a blessing. So I really appreciate you. You have been amazing, and I love what you're doing for the community.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thank you.